Good afternoon. It is 2:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, August 30th, year 2022. Intro songs. Thanks, without permission, of course, to Mount Shrine 2020 album. Name of the song is Reach None, and the second song is from a group called Cats and Dogs, and it's simply called Life. Today we have a reading, and this is going to go down as a biography. We do have a series of biographies, which we will continue to populate on Housatonic Live channel. Housatonic is the name of a river in the state of Connecticut, the namesake of the channel where I grew up, many generations from there. I worked 20 years in the big tech industries, if you will, data storage specifically, along with backup and archival mid-range enterprise storage systems. Worked 10 or so years as a software engineer, focusing on device drivers and operating systems. I have 2 patents to my name. I could have a whole lot more if they knew how freaking easy they were to apply for and get. And in fact, I have to admit I would also have 0, again, if it wasn't for the fact that someone told me how easy they are to get. But that's a whole nother story. Matter of fact, I don't even know why my patents were approved. Like, it just seems like such common sense. It had something to do with finding recursive loops in the back end of a serial attached storage deployment using SAS protocols, and with a certain levels of expansion on the back end and fault isolation algorithms, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, I'm not doing that stuff anymore. I also worked for 10 years as a sales consultant, pre-sales, technical training, worked my way into a competitive analysis role. I was as high-ranking role as you're going to get at Dell Corporation, which had purchased EMC, which had a very good competitive intelligence division for their data storage products, and also worked as a product marketing director. Product marketing is a little bit different than traditional marketing, or I should say, there's a nuance to it where you still can enjoy some of your technical background. You don't have to completely dumb down everything and just focus on high-level stuff and images and getting the color codes right and everything else. You actually do a lot of competitive intelligence for that. But all that said, that's my background. Variety of individual, or I should say specific life circumstances led me to walking away from that, and a certain amount of financial security that went with it almost 3 years ago. It's been 3 years since I walked away from that job, and I've been doing this. I focus on the technology end of things. I bring with this a background where I needed to learn how to be an analyst, because there's no schools that actually teach you how to be an analyst. And I apply those skills to what has been missing as far as collecting and gathering evidence and the history of many of the sciences related to atomic energy, certain types of weapon systems, cancers, viruses, and so on, and using that history to get a much better understanding of what exactly is driving some of the insanity of some of these fields right now. And I'm always very clear. I reach out to other people who are molecular biologists and backgrounds in genetics and so on and so forth to help fill in my gaps, because my role as an analyst was always to understand that there's no freaking way I can understand everything. So how do you learn a lot fast enough to enable myself or teach other people how to be analysts to make decisions which can improve sales outcomes, making sure that customers get the right products, helping guide decisions that companies would make with respect to engineering new products, features to add, features not to add, what types of messaging is being missed from the marketing literature, all of that type of stuff. And usually I would have to help steer some pretty big decisions with very limited access to data. When you're working in one of those roles, like for example, if you're a competitive intelligence professional and you're working at Boeing Corporation, You can't go out and buy an Airbus. You can't. You can't go out and buy an Airbus and then test it and then take it apart and figure out what they're doing. No. You need to, there's all kinds of rules that limit how you can gather information about the competitors' products. Gathering information is not illegal, of course. The way it gathered is, of course, subject to all kinds of regulations. Making sure that you're not breaking confidentiality agreements. When people from other companies are let go, you can't just hire them and have them download all of their data because they've signed agreements. And of course, there's all kinds of other international laws and so on. Anyways, just felt as though it was appropriate for the new audience, if there is any new audience at this time, to understand where I come from, what is my particular background. As you can see, I got a Milwaukee t-shirt on. I work part-time right now in the trades to get a few extra dollars because this still loses money, even after 3 years. Still can't quite even cover the base expenses for the operation, but whatever. All I know is I would never have been able to sleep if I didn't do what I've been doing for the past 3 years. Now, this show today is going to be a show where we talk about a Dr. Charlotte Friend, Friend. And the only reason why I opened up this page here is I wanted to go to Houstonic.live, which is one of the two main URLs that I have. This is the URL. I can't even type right. How would you supposed to believe I was ever a software engineer if I can't type properly? And you go to Houstonic Live. That's the name of the show. Gee Willikers, how about that? And we have links on top to the YouTube channels that we use. We have a YouTube Live 1, we just call it, which is what we're using right now, as well as a Live 2 and Live 3. They all have different videos on them. Oftentimes, we have to take videos down after they go on YouTube because of the state of censorship right now within the United States of America. Most of our videos are backed up onto BitChute and Odyssey. We've been backing up most of the recent ones over the last several months on Rumble. We also put a few videos on an upstart site called We Talk, You Listen. If you go to playlists, you will see that we've organized some of the 450 or so regular length videos. In addition, we have about 600 video shorts, 1-minute videos. Some of them have been duplicated onto YouTube. We've also have about 150 to 200 shared videos online. That's content that I didn't make. It's just content from other people that I felt as though anything I could do to help that content be preserved, archived, and made visible to as many people possible, that I have a responsibility to do that. Part of our job here. And if you do go down, you will see that if you just click on the biographies, we have a biography on Dr. Francis Allen Plummer, also known as Frank Plummer. Dr. James Carroll Hill, who is one of the two deputies of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases that reported directly to Dr. Anthony Fauci, that died of, I would say, rather suspicious circumstances. Sally Heat, she is she was the press secretary for Washington State Senator Daniel Evans. She died in 1986 of one of the most brutal, stabbed 30 times deaths in Washington, D.C., in a very good neighborhood, and her murder today remains absolutely unsolved. She had no children, so the only person in the world, again, this is what we do, who is maintaining her legacy, her picture, and a little bit of a shout out that if anyone just ever happens to have information about Sally Heat, that they could contact the authorities and maybe help bring some justice to her life, which she lost at only age 35. And then, of course, there's my my uncle on my wife's side. Uncle Jack is what we call him, who was one of the United States Coast Guard men who died on the the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Cuyahoga in, did that sink? 1978 or 82. Michael Dolan is a U.S. Marine who took his own life a couple of years ago, age 31. And I don't know him that well, but I've good friends with a friend of his who has also served in the United States military. So anything I can do to keep his legacy alive, I feel an obligation to do. And today's show is going to be about a Charlotte friend. And the way which we are going to approach it is we're going to read, and we'll just see how it goes. And I don't. This is a live show. I don't have the comments open just yet. I may open them in a little bit. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. What we will probably do is, hopefully, I will be able to leave this video up in its entirety on Live One. Not going to say anything that's too. There's certain things which, once said, result in a video needing to be taken down. In other words, it's only a matter of time. Surprisingly, one of those things is actually talking truth about how FBI missing children statistics work. If you actually describe how that works and how that information is being misinterpreted and misrepresented by some people who are, dare I say, a little bit politically conspiratorial, maybe trying to dirty the waters, if you will, those videos actually get targeted. You think the conspiracy is not wanting to shed light on something really bad, but in fact, I get a channel strike for trying to actually describe what was going on, and that, as bad as things are, it wasn't what was being said that we couldn't say, if that makes any sense. Today's show is about Dr. Charlotte Friend, F-R-I-E-N-D, last name. Unique name, unique person. I first discovered Dr. Charlotte Friend, who passed in 1986 or 1987, I think, because she was a researcher who got started at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital on the island of Manhattan in New York City, in the laboratory of Dr. Cornelius P. Rhodes, working, actually that was her boss's boss, but her real boss in the laboratory that she was assigned in was a Dr. Alice E. Moore, middle name, middle initial, still don't know what it is. And Dr. Alice E. Moore is one of the 10 most important, easily scientists to understand, to really, if you really want to piece together the full history of genetics, cancers, viruses, radiation, atomic energy, and so on. You need to, and of course, weaponized cancers, weaponized viruses that can cause cancers. You need to know of, and you need to have researched Alice E. Moore. And this was a student of hers who was one of the most prolific students of Alice Moore. Now, I have started using a tool called, do I have it open right now? Let's see here. Tiki-Toki. That is a strange name for a tool, but let me show you guys yet another one of the nickel and dime accounts that we have. We have so many here. Excuse me here. So this is actually a URL that I can share, and I will share as I continue to populate it in. Tiki-Toki, that's Tika-Toki, is one of about 20 or 30 or so companies that makes online timeline creation tools. Now, there are many companies that have tried to make timeline tools which allow you to visually represent events when they happen in relation to each other, maybe include pictures. You can zoom in and zoom out and so on and so forth. They all have different capabilities. Some you can only view locally. Some you can view online. Some allow only one editor. Some allow multiple editors. Some allow links outside. Some don't. Some allow sharing. Some you need to log in. There's a huge range of capabilities. Some are incredibly beautiful visually. But some of them are more oriented towards things which happen at a particular time, like an event. Some of them are more for long timelines. In other words, if you were to say person X worked in person, let's say Dr. Patrick worked in Dr. Morris's lab for 5 years. Well, how do you represent that? That's not a one point in time. Yeah, it's a bar. It's a range. And on that, you may need to represent different types of data, like Morris discovered this virus on this specific date. So some timeline tools are more oriented towards ranges, and some are more oriented towards point in time. Anyways, Tiki-Toki is a tool. I think it's about $20, $30, $40 a month. I forget. I've used it before, and I have started to use Tiki-Toki again after not using it for a while because of a request. I should say because of what has recently happened with the, speaking of the NIAID director, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci has announced his retirement. I don't know if he actually had his last day or not, but as of July or early August of 2022, Dr. Fauci is finally, after 40 plus years as the director of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, and taking that organization, and it's increased at least 10 times, if not 100 times in size and headcount and budget and so on and so forth, that he has announced his retirement. And some people believe that Fauci has been a hero, that he has saved millions of lives, and that he is unnecessarily and incorrectly painted out to be a bad guy. While others believe that Dr. Fauci is the embodiment of evil. Now, my audience may not necessarily believe the first. However, most of my audience would even look at the second and go, he definitely seems to have a, it's not, he shouldn't be laughing in a congressional testimony about for example, the Zika cases where so many women sought out an abortion because of the fear that someone like Anthony Fauci was raising. So there's certainly an inappropriate or inability to connect with human beings there. But evil's a funny word. So trying to dance around that word a little bit, or at least trying to make sure that we're applying it properly, I don't know. But I've been warning people on my show that when it comes to Fauci, and this, don't worry, this is a show about Charlotte Friend and why we're going to talk about the Charlotte Friend biography, okay? That Dr. Anthony Fauci is not, even if you have a negative view of the health institutes and the direction of cancer and virus research in the United States, and maybe even the world for that matter, it did not start when Anthony Fauci was made the director of the NIAID. Therefore, it's not going to end now. This machinery, this quest for cancer-causing viruses or using viruses to cure cancer, virotherapy, did not start when Anthony Fauci was appointed in the early 1980s as the director of the NIAID, and it's not going to stop now. What led? Fauci was hired to do a job. He was hired to do a job in a certain way because before he was hired, there are 50 years of history of nonstop, incredibly interesting events. Some of them, some people believe everything's a plan. And, sometimes I actually think that might even be true with the whole fallen angel theory. But there was a series of discoveries. And, of course, there was all kinds of, there were many events. Some happened, which is some people couldn't even predict what was going to happen. Events related to World War I, World War II, political events, which forever impacted the research of cancers, of viruses, of genetics, the pursuit of atomic energy, the study of radiation coming from radium. We keep talking about this book many, many times. From Louis A. Campos, Radium and the Secret of Life. Secret of Life. the search for immortality, and so on and so forth. All of these things were going on for 50 years before Fauci was hired. So if you want to understand why Fauci was hired into that job and what the role was or what the vision was when he started, you need to look at the history beforehand. It's a pretty simple concept. That's what we do here. We dig into the history, and I use my background as an analyst to try to get an idea of what we should look at. For example, okay, how many people talk about Bill Gates of Microsoft as being one of the most important people to know about now because of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And there's portrayals that Gates is a hero or Gates is the ultimate bad guy and so on and so forth. And we would ask, okay, so he's using this enormous quantity of money, right, to make these decisions. And almost no one will actually even question the origins of that money. So if all of the money behind Microsoft is the thing that enabled Bill Gates to do whatever the Bill Gates thing is, then it really is however that money came into being, which we should look at as being also part of what drives what Bill Gates is doing. They're not necessarily disconnected. So if there's more to Bill Gates than just writing some interesting software for personal computers and having a monopoly, well, people should know about that. And almost no one digs into that. Therefore, as a consequence of being able, or a byproduct, I should say, of being able of knowing that we need to look into the real Microsoft story, we have unearthed an indescribable amount of information, which has helped us understand the present simply by having very simple and analytical approach. And that is, well, if Bill Gates, because he's rich, is making decisions, well, then why did he get rich? What was it that allowed the richness to exist? And no one will look at that. They just assume the starting point is Bill Gates, lots of money. And that's it. So it's actually very simple. So while I do not have a deep background in history, I do have a background in learning how to reverse engineer multi-million-dollar storage systems with very little money, and knowing which questions to ask first and how to make big conclusions rapidly, because my time was limited and big corporate decisions and engineering decisions depended upon this. So that's an example. So here we work on this timeline of events, and most of these are related to the history of cancer and virus research. And we'll go over this chart in more detail as time goes on. But what became apparent to me, and this, by the way, I'm still missing many data points on here. Okay, this is just getting started. What became apparent to me here was, wow, Dr. Charlotte Friend, who I knew of, was far more impactful in the history of cancer and virus research than I had realized. Multiple events, Charlotte Friend was there, and her research was part of guiding many things which had come to pass. Let's see here. Do I even have the? There was one. Let's see. Let me come up with a example here. I can zoom in a little bit more. So after Jonas Salk had done written research at the Salk Institute, which was created in 1962. Jonas Salk, of course, the creator, one of the two main inventors of a polio vaccine in the 1950s. the person at the first dedicated full cancer research institute in the world, Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, who immediately started looking at Salk's research and building upon it, was Charlotte Friend. And she was nominated as one of the Women of the Year for the year 1957, 1958. She was the representative for the United States at the Cancer Congress in Russia in 1962, and it was much of her studies in lymphocytes and mouse cancers, which were a big part of driving topics related to the United States Special Virus Cancer Program in the 1960s and the early 1970s. Now, Charlotte Friend did not live to an old age, but we see that her contributions were very impactful in this history of studying cancers, studying viruses, studying the virus-cancer connection, which is really studying what is it about these genetic these instructions, these little micro programs of viruses, which are causing cancers, are curing cancers, and all of this stuff is happening at the very same time that so much information is being learned about the mapping, just the structure of DNA. Charlotte Friend, starting in the late 1940s, early 1950s, they had just determined, not they in the Sloan Kettering, but scientists had just determined the mechanics of chromosomes just a couple of decades before that. So things are advancing very, very rapidly during this period of time. And while Charlotte Friend does have a Wikipedia page, I got onto YouTube and I searched for Charlotte Friend in double quotes, and lo and behold, I guess I'm 30 minutes in, wasting your time. You turn this on, you want to hear about Charlotte Friend, and I'm 30 minutes in. Sorry about that. I'll probably still leave this stuff in. But I go to YouTube, and lo and behold, no Charlotte Friend. Not one video. Now, look, I understand it's not like searching for Albert Einstein or Galileo. So I knew that there wouldn't be billions of videos on Charlotte Friend, but not one video to just read her biography. I was like, oh, wow, this is actually almost as bad as Alice Moore was before I discovered her. And that is what I used to say, okay, so we need to read her biography, and we need to make it available for other people to hear while they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. So what we're going to use for her, and there's several people who actually wrote white papers on her. There's actually a whole book. There's a whole book on Charlotte Friend, and I just started to order a copy of it. Unfortunately, needed a credit card. My credit card is somewhere else in the house, and I just wanted to start to show it too. There's a whole 100-something page book on her accomplishments. So I will, since I haven't been able to find a PDF for it, I will buy the real book and I will do a scan and make the book available electronically. But there's many white papers that have been written on Charlotte Friend. And the lack of mentioning of her usually to me is a sign that there's a lot to I think that people would benefit from knowing. Okay, so where should we see here? We are going to find her on the, let's see here, National Academies of Science and Charlotte Friend. There you go. There's a biographical memoir. All right. So, everyone, I guess I'm not going to read comments right now. Hopefully you understand. Just allow me to have a sip of water. Of course, if I was able to find videos on her, even if it was just her talking for a couple of minutes, I would share. You can email those at live@housatonicits.com. Don't use the research account. I had this idea in my head at one point in time that I would have different accounts for different purposes, and it's just me. And with my ADD, I have just completely dropped the ball of being able to keep up with things. The good news, though, I won't say the person's name, but I have been talking to one person who might be interested in doing a lot of work for the channel to help with maintaining chats, maintaining emails, helping out with some of the business and so on. We will see how that goes. I'm excited about that. Many people have offered to help. Many people who I've met become friends of mine. I've been gun shy about it, though, because I need someone that can make a lot of decisions without too much of my input. And also, it needs to be a long-term thing, at least a year. There's so much to do, and we'll just see where that goes. So with that said, matter of fact, I might be able to just, I want to keep her picture up here. So if I duplicate it, this way I can keep her picture up. Excellent, 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 excellent. Okay. Okay. So Charlotte Friend, born 1921, died 1987. This is a biographical memoir. It was written by Leela Diamond in 1994, I believe. So in 1956, at a meeting of the American Association for Cancer Research, the AACR, in Atlantic City, Charlotte Friend reported on the isolation... I apologize. Let me start again. In 1956, at a meeting of the American Association for Cancer Research, the AACR, in Atlantic City, Charlotte Friend reported on the isolation of a virus that produced a fatal leukemia when inoculated into adult mice. This was a time when the concept of viruses causing cancer was still viewed with extreme skepticism, and the presentation of such data by an attractive young woman not long out of graduate school was met with disbelief and derision. The audience's arguments against her findings were essentially the same as those Peyton Roos had heard in the early 1900s when he described a chicken tumor that was inducible by a transmissible agent. And just in case, because I mean, look, none of us humans age quite as beautifully as we were on the day we were born, the exception of Mrs. Kulak, of course. The open image new tab. This was young Charlotte Friend there. They argued, on one hand, that the agent isolated was not a virus because it induced a malignant disease, and, on the other, that the disease could not be a malignancy because it was virus-induced. However, the rapid confirmation of Friend's findings by the highly respected pathologist Jacob Furth, F-U-R-T-H, led to a change in attitudes, and the scientific community soon realized that a virus which rapidly induces a malignant disease in adult mice provides an excellent model in which to study both viral oncology and the pathogenesis of neoplasia. Friend's virus became the primary system for research on viral leukemogenesis, and today it is acknowledged that no one who works on tumor viruses fails to be touched by the contributions of Charlotte Friend. Charlotte Friend was born in 1921 in New York City on Houston Street in Lower Manhattan to parents who had immigrated from Russia as young adults. Her mother had been trained as a pharmacist, but gave up any professional ambitions to raise a family. Friend's father was a successful businessman who died when she was 3 years old, and her mother moved the family of four to the Bronx in order to be near and have the support of other relatives. The substantial inheritance left by Friend's father was dissipated in the financial disaster of 1929, and the fact that the family had to accept, quote, home relief, unquote, from the city in order to survive had a lasting effect on Friend. She always admired her mother for having been able to keep the family together during this period and for never letting the children doubt that they would complete their education. While growing up, Charlotte Friend took advantage of all opportunities and wonders that New York City offered. She became a very knowledgeable and avid devotee of all its cultural activities and successfully competed for admission to Hunter College High School, a part of the city's excellent tuition-free education system for gifted students. After finishing high school, she attended Hunter College at night while working in a physician's office during the day. Upon graduating in 1943, Charlotte Friend enlisted in the United States Navy and was assigned to Midshipmen's School at Smith College, from which she graduated as an ensign in April of 1944. She was soon promoted to Lieutenant J.G. and appointed second in command of the hematology laboratory at the Naval Hospital in Shoemaker, California. From early childhood, she had thought about becoming a scientist, but this was her first real experience working in a laboratory, and it convinced her that this was what she wanted to do with her life. When the war ended, Friend had the financial support of the GI Bill of Rights to continue her schooling. She considered attending medical school, but chose instead to enroll as a graduate student in the Department of Microbiology at Yale University. She already appreciated the importance of the advice and help of outstanding scientists for her research, and frequently came to New York City on weekends to consult with the eminent immunologists Elvin Kabat, K-A-B-A-T, and Michael Heidelberger at Columbia. She received a PhD from Yale in 1950 with a thesis on the effects of sodium I always forget how to say this word. Salicylate, S-A-L-I-C-Y-L-A-T-E, which is also known as aspirin, on antigen-antibody reactions. Charlotte Friend was hired by Cornelius P. Rhodes. The same Cornelius P. Rhodes, by the way, I'll restart this paragraph in a moment. Cornelius P. Rhodes, who was, he had made it up to a very high-ranking role in the United States military in World War II. He was studying cancers and how cancers could be caused, possibly even cured by certain types of chemicals. Much of that technology is related to mustard gas. While Cornelius P. Rhodes wound up on the cover of Time magazine in 1947-1948, it should be noted that in 1945 he was appointed one of the first directors of Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York City, which is directly across the street from the Rockefeller Institute, and received its initial funding from Sloan and Kettering, two billionaire industrialists in the United States of America, or at least equivalent, 1.5 days after the bombing at Hiroshima, as a hospital which will specialize in cancers. Cornelius P. Rhodes also got into a lot of trouble and caused a lot of controversy regarding non-consensual medical experimentation on U.S. military troops, and in particular residents in Puerto Rico and a few other places throughout the I don't know about the late 1920s, but definitely in the 1930s. Now, the truthfulness of any of that stuff, we don't know. But I'll tell you what, usually when there's smoke like that, well, you know how the phrase goes. So let's restart this again. Charlotte Friend was hired by Cornelius P. Rhodes, the director of what was the new Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research, to work in the virus laboratory of Dr. Alice E. Moore. Now, let's add a little bit of color to that sentence too. Alice E. Moore. It's just undescribable. Alice E. Moore effectively ran the production for all yellow fever vaccines at the New York University and Memorial Hospital in World War II. Years later, Alice Moore was the head of all cell cultures for the United States Special Virus Cancer Program. And the cell cultures are everything. Everything. She was 10 years senior to a Dr. Chester Southam, who is infamous for having used, at very least, prisoners, but possibly also elderly people, for, again, non-consensual medical experimentation for injections of what they thought at the time was West Nile virus to see if it could cause or cure tumors, or if these were tumors and cancers were transmissible between different animals, different types of animals, or animals and people. And much of that research happened in the late 1940s, early 1950s. I have a whole show on Dr. Alice E. Moore, who passed in the 1990s. But Charlotte Friend is perhaps her most celebrated and well-known student. In fact, most of Charlotte Friend's early work also has the name of Alice E. Moore on it. I found it alarming that there was no mention of Alice Moore in the Charlotte Friend Wikipedia page. To me, again, as an analyst, knowing how to read things, if you're a musical artist and you're discovered by, let's say you're playing in a small bar in Tennessee one day, right? And it just so happens that Michael Jackson was, driving through town, and Michael Jackson was, he was a little parched, came out that night, needed to get a drink, decided to go to the bar, and you were playing on stage, and Michael Jackson's the person that discovered you. Every time you tell your story about how you were discovered as an artist, you would say, I couldn't believe it. It was just an amazing coincidence. Michael Jackson was there that night. I had a great night. I was in a good mood. Everything just came together, and it was awesome. And to this day, I still talk to Michael Jackson. That's what you would say. So if you never tell anyone that it just so happened that the night that you were discovered as a musical artist, it was Michael Jackson that saw you, people go, well, why would you not say that? Or if your biography was being written, and if that's omitted, that's kind of a big data point. And it's hard to believe that that would just skip someone's mind. That would mean that there's a reason why that doesn't want to be put out there. So the fact that Charlotte Friend didn't have a video on YouTube, alarming. But the fact that her Wikipedia page didn't even mention Alice Moore, that's when I knew we needed to read her biography. And the video I have on Alice E. Moore is Alice E. Moore, how Dr. Alice E. Moore showed us that there are no such things as useless eaters. So let me just restart the paragraph, shall we? And we got a long ways to go still. Charlotte Friend was hired by Cornelius P. Rhodes, and that's Rhoads, for those who need to look it up, the director of what was then the new Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research, to work in the virus laboratory of Dr. Alice E. Moore. Rhodes was a very dynamic and enthusiastic individual who was extremely supportive of the members of his institute, and he and Charlotte Friend developed a strong mutual respect and admiration. At Sloan Kettering, Charlotte Friend and Cecily Cannon Selby, S-E-L-B-Y, a recent PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, who was interested in cell structure. Oh my, I have to restart that sentence. I'm sorry. At Sloan Kettering, Charlotte Friend met Cecily Cannon Selby, a recent PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, who was interested in cell structure. This was in the early days of electron microscopy, and when Selby found a microscope in the institute that was not being used, she and Charlotte Friend decided to examine the fine structure of the cells of the Ehrlich, the EHRLICH, ascites, ASCITES, carcinoma, which is a transplantable tumor of mice that, at the time, was a commonly used model for cancer research. They unexpectedly observed cytoplasmic, quote, particles of constant diameter in close array, unquote, that were similar to those seen in thin sections of virus-infected cells. And Charlotte Friend then sought to determine whether these particles were biologically active. Charlotte Friend inoculated cell-free extracts of the ascites cells into newborn mice, following a procedure for transmission of a murine leukemia virus that Ludwig Gross, Gross, had introduced a few years earlier. The mice remained healthy over a 14-month period of observation, but when sacrificed and autopsied, 6 mice were found to have enlarged livers and spleens. Charlotte Friend may have been surprised or dismayed to see what looked to be leukemia when she had inoculated an extract from carcinoma cells. But she was smart enough and curious enough to pursue the observation. Because newborn mice were unavailable, she injected cell suspensions from the enlarged spleens into adult mice, and within a few months, several had palpable spleens. By the third passage of either cell suspensions or filtrates of cell extracts, a high percentage of mice were developing leukemia with a latent period of only 2 to 3 weeks. The disease Charlotte Friend was seeing was very different from the lymphoma induced by Gross's virus. It was characterized by the erythroblastosis, erythroblastosis, and profound anemia. It was transmissible into adult, non-inbred mice, and the latent period before the first symptoms appeared was very short. The latter fact being powerful evidence that the transmissible agent was directly involved in the induction of the leukemia. It is interesting to note that the cytoplasmic particles originally seen by Selby and Charlotte Friend were very different in size and structure from what was eventually proven to be the etiologic agent of Charlotte Friend leukemia. In very elegant electron microscope studies done with Etienne de Harven, Charlotte Friend found that her agent was a type C virus, or what later became classified on the basis of genomic structure as a retrovirus, reverse transcriptase containing RNA virus. Charlotte Friend was one of the very first people to really get into studying retroviruses. Charlotte Friend and de Harven were among the first to describe the life cycle of these donut-shaped viruses that, quote, bubbled, unquote, a term suggested by their technician from the cell structure of the leukemic cells. Charlotte Friend never forgot the reception she and her new murine leukemia virus received in the 1956 AACR meeting. Those who were present remember the dignity and courage with which she responded to the barrage of questions. She herself described the proceedings beautifully and in detail in her presidential address to the same society 20 years later. She said that, despite warnings that serious objections would be raised, quote, by no stretch of the imagination could the violent storm of controversy that erupted after her presentation have been anticipated, unquote. She wondered why her friend who chaired the session did not use Peyton Roos's plea to, quote, keep open minds, unquote, as an opportunity to cool the heated atmosphere and finally bring the session to a close. It is a mark of Charlotte Friend's character that she did not reveal the identity of that chairman in her presidential address, and that they always remained the dearest of friends. She was proud to have, quote, emerged unbowed, if a little bloodied, unquote, from that experience, and later was able to joke that those who persisted in their heretical beliefs about tumor viruses were being accused of having, quote, either holes in their heads or holes in their filters, unquote. However, it may be that because of the rather traumatic experience, Charlotte Friend never did develop into a strong, confident speaker. Throughout her career, whenever she had to give a talk, she was always very nervous and on edge in anticipation, and spent a great deal of time and effort writing out exactly what it was that she wanted to say. As co-editor of the Journal of Experimental Medicine and a strong supporter, Peyton Roos, and by the way, RUS, last name, I just uploaded a video about it's a 35-minute video which I shared on my BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble channels about the history of cancer-causing viruses or cancer-causing virus research. And Peyton Roos is a giant in this field. And he was the first to show that he could transmit tumors between the legs of different types of chickens. And it took 40 or 50 years for him to win a Nobel Prize for that research. And Peyton Roos worked for the one of the Flexner families, Simon Flexner. I think he was also in the Rockefeller Institute. So actually would have been working almost across the street, matter of fact, of the Memorial Sloan Kettering. Interesting. As co-editor of the Journal of Experimental Medicine and a strong supporter, Peyton Roos worked with Charlotte Friend on the writing and editing of the first full-length publication describing the new virus. He made many suggestions regarding documentation, details, and presentation, for he believed that Charlotte Friend was, quote, in a position to settle all doubts as concerns a virus causing leukemia in mice, unquote, if she presented what she had discovered, quote, in a convincing way, unquote. The resulting publication provided the information the scientific community needed to accept the virus and to recognize its potential as an ideal model system with which to work. The neoplastic nature of the disease induced was subsequently confirmed by the demonstration that transplantable solid tumors could be obtained with leukemic tissues from virus-infected mice. The leukemia was originally described as being not clearly granulocytic or monocytic, and it required extensive experimentation by Charlotte Friend and others to demonstrate that the primary target for malignant transformations was, in fact, an this is what happens when you have a software engineer, data storage analyst reading biology. Oh, let's try this again. Erythroid. Okay. Let's try this again. The leukemia was originally described as being not clearly granulocytic or monocytic, and it required extensive experimentation by Charlotte Friend and others to demonstrate that the primary target for malignant transformations was, in fact, an erythroid precursor. Not bad. A development of the disease is now thought to involve at least two events: an early stimulation of erythro. Oh boy! Tell you what. Let's go to YouTube and see how that word is pronounced. Let's try this here.
What's the one question I get asked the most? What pans
I don't know.
use at home? Well, today I'm ready to lift the curtain and tell you that I'm using Hexblad. Do you really want to see how good?
Let's try this here.
Erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis.
Erythropoiesis.
Erythropoiesis.
Erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis.
Erythropoiesis.
Erythropoiesis.
Erythropoiesis.
You can, by the way, you can type in words into YouTube, and you'll find videos on how to pronounce them. Erythropoiesis. Thank you. Ooh, oh, sorry. All right. Let's get back. A development of the disease is now thought to involve at least two events: an early stimulation of erythropoiesis, followed by a clonal event that results in transplantable, immortable erythroleukemia cells. Following discovery of the Gross and Charlotte-Friend viruses, a number of other RNA viruses that induced leukemia in mice and other species were isolated. What had originally been disbelief now turned to accolades, and Charlotte-Friend began to be honored for her work. In 1962, she received the Alfred P. Sloan Award for Cancer Research and elected to use the money to travel around the world, spending 3-month periods in research institutes in France, Israel, and Australia, working with such scientists as André Le Wolf, Leo Sachs, and Donald Metcalf. She had written that the trip was one of the most important experiences of her life, a major reason being that she fulfilled her long-cherished dream of working at the Pasteur Institute. Despite all the work that had been done by Charlotte-Friend leukemia virus, or the Friend leukemia virus, which is the FLV, we still understand very little about the molecular mechanisms by which it replicates and transforms. We do know that these mechanisms are extremely complex, so it is perhaps not surprising that over the years there have been disagreements and controversies regarding various aspects of the virus and the disease induced. The original virus isolate produced a leukemia associated with anemia, but with its distribution to other laboratories and passage from host to host, virus strains that produced polycythemia rather than anemia appeared. These strains caused formation of macroscopic foci of primitive erythroid cells on the spleen surface, which appeared prior to the... Oh my goodness. This word is ridiculous. Let's see how we can do with this word here.
Hepatosplenomegaly. Hepatosplenomegaly.
Hepatosplenomegaly. Wow, that is quite the word. Now you gotta listen to another freaking Hertz commercial. All right. Hepatosplenomegaly.
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 Okay, so let's try this in a sentence, guys. Okay. These strains caused formation of macroscopic foci of primitive erythroid cells on the spleen surface, which appeared prior to the, let's say it,
Hepatosplenomegaly.
Hepatosplenomegaly. That sounds like an awesome metal band and could be quantified. These foci were shown to be due to the presence in preparations of polycythemia-inducing strains of a defective spleen focus-forming virus, or SFFV, that was competent for cell transformation but not for virus replication. Some investigators reported that only the polycythemic strains of the Charlotte Friend virus, or the Friend virus, induced leukemia in adult mice, and that the anemic strain was effective only in neonates. It was suggested that, contrary to what Charlotte Friend had originally reported, more than one virus was required for the pathogenesis of the leukemia. Charlotte Friend always resisted that idea. Perhaps the cool reception that she and the virus received originally had sensitized her to what she may have considered criticism of that early work and her powers of observation. She maintained that in her hands, even after 20 years of continuous passage, the original anemic strain of FLV, the Friend leukemia virus, FLVA, which she referred to as the wild type or the prototype virus, its host range, latent period, and age dependence, and the syndrome that the virus induced were no different from what she first reported. She insisted that FLVA did not contain a defective spleen focus forming component, and that it was different from the virus strains others have worked on with subsequently. Charlotte Friend's friend, Frank Lilly, once, quote, tried to convince her that she should be proud to have discovered not just one, but in fact two viruses that were totally unique in the mouse leukemia virus world, but she would have nothing to do with that idea, unquote. And indeed, others have shown that molecularly cloned FLVA with no SFFV component induces an anemic form of an erythroproliferative disease in newborn mice, which resembles the early stages of the disease induced by wild-type virus. However, no one has yet explained the mechanisms by which the profound anemia induced by such virus in either newborns or adults progresses to leukemia. Most virologists have taken the position that the Friend virus, Charlotte Friend virus, is a complex composed of a defective SFFV that depends on replication competent FLV for its own replication, and that both viruses are required for production of fatal leukemia in adult mice. Charlotte Friend always acknowledged that during in vivo passage, virus variants might have arisen through recombination with cellular elements or endogenous viruses, and was not surprised that an agent such as SFFV was found in some virus stocks. However, Charlotte Friend wanted to understand what might have happened in other laboratories to discuss the various possibilities with other investigators and to analyze the passage histories of the various virus strains. Those such as Arthur Axelrad, not Axelrod, and Frank Lilly, who had the patience for such discussions, remained good, lifelong friends. A friend. Others wanted to others who wanted to get on with it and not be overly concerned with what might have happened to the virus years ago, lost touch with her, and unfortunately, perhaps lost respect for her and her accomplishments as well. Cornelius P. Rhodes, the director of Sloan Kettering, had died in 1959, and the subsequent administration was much more structured than his had been. Charlotte Friend did not have the warm relationship with the new director that she had with Rhodes, and did not think she was getting the recognition she deserved. Thus, Charlotte Friend was receptive when approached about joining the faculty at the new medical school being organized at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. In 1966, she accepted a position there as professor and director of the Center for Experimental Cell Biology. She requested and received an appointment that carried no teaching responsibilities. She wanted to be free to do what she did best and most enjoyed, which was research. The new laboratory was rather modest in size and amenities, and a somewhat isolated basic science entity. In her new position, Charlotte Friend was responsible for raising essentially all the money needed for staff, supplies, equipment, and support services. She became tightly locked into the federal grant system for the major requirements of the center, which she headed. And in her later years, this became a tremendous burden that interfered with her enjoyment of doing research. I know a lot of other scientists and researchers who complain about the same thing. As a matter of fact, while I'm not a scientist, I am an analyst and researcher, and I actually have to pay to do this. I literally I still can't even clear all my expenses. I understand how it is. So let's just say respect. All right, let's say respect here. She had observed earlier that the cells of the solid tumors produced by transplantation of leukemic tissue from Friend virus inoculated mice showed no recognizable erythroid elements, but that the erythroid nature of the cells could be demonstrated under certain conditions. For example, Charlotte Friend and Cecilia Patulia were able to establish permanent cell lines in culture from the tumor cells, and to show that, even when cloned, these cultures consisted of undifferentiated cells and a small percentage of cells at various stages of erythroid maturation. Their observation that these malignant cells were, in fact, capable of undergoing maturation was met with disbelief by some colleagues, even though the evidence should have been incontrovertible from their slides and photographs. They asked, how can tumor cells that have been in culture for 6 months have given rise to erythroblasts? There must be a contaminant, unquote. But again, in the face of skepticism, Charlotte Friend persisted, knowing that her cell system provided a superb, quote, model for the study of leukemia as a disease resulting from a maturation defect, unquote. She began to explore the possibility that the differentiation block of the leukemic cells could be removed. This led her to the discovery that Friend erythroleukemia cells, FELC, in culture could be further stimulated to differentiate along the erythroid pathway by the addition of the solvent DMSO, or dimethyl sulfoxide, to the medium. I had been using DMSO, this is the author of this document, as a solvent for hydrophobic compounds in cell cultures. I remember her phoning one day to ask about the concentration to use for an experiment she wanted to try. A few days later, she called back, bursting with excitement about her cells being, quote, pinkies, all pink, unquote. Her associate, Bill Scher, SCHER, also remembers her running up and down the hall holding up the tube with the pellet of pink cells for all to see. She went on to show that, with some highly inducible erythroleukemia cell lines, the percentage of benzidine positive, or hemoglobin producing cells could be increased to over 85% from a baseline of 1% after 45 days in medium containing DMSO. Charlotte Friend had clearly and dramatically demonstrated that expression of the malignant phenotype could be reversed experimentally. Her observation was quickly reproduced and confirmed in other laboratories, and it soon became apparent that the morphological and biochemical alterations that followed induction of differentiation were familiar to those occurring in normal erythropoiesis. Charlotte Friend cells became a widely used model for studying control of hemoglobin synthesis, as well as for analyzing the overall regulation of gene expression in cell proliferation and differentiation. This new discovery resulted in another exciting period of recognition for Charlotte Friend. She was elected to the Hunter College Hall of Fame and received the Yale Science and Engineering Association Award. She was honored with the Dam Shak Medal, the Prix Grifoel, and the Papanicolaou Award. I'm sure I messed up at least one of those words. In 1976, she was accorded the ultimate recognition by her peers, election to the National Academy of Sciences. In the late 1960s, a young Italian pathologist, Giovanni Rossi, R-O-S-S-I, spent several years working in Charlotte Friend's laboratory. They became close scientific colleagues and devoted friends, and in 1977, when she had the opportunity to spend a sabbatical year abroad, she went to Rome, where Rossi had settled. She had a wonderful time working at the Italian National Research Council laboratory, where Rita Levi Montalcini was director. The two women had great respect for each other. When Charlotte Friend left Rome, Professor Levi Montalcini gave her an engraving entitled, quote, "The Spiral of Archimedes," quote, done by her twin sister, Paola. Wow. That's probably more than we need to know right now. Let's see here. The rest of it comes down to awards and so on here. Talks about her family a little bit. I think some of that might be important. Yeah. Excuse me. One of Charlotte Friend's last public appearances was at Brandeis University, where she received an honorary Doctor of Science degree in May of 1986. Matter of fact, let's pull up the age matching photo now of the senior Charlotte Friend, and I can commiserate with her because I'm a year shy of 50 right now, and I'm looking at my pictures and I'm going, I'm starting to look like a different person myself. Oh boy. One of Charlotte Friend's last public appearances was at Brandeis University, where she received an honorary Doctor of Science degree in May of 1986. She was very proud to have been selected for this honor when she left her hospital bed to make the trip to Waltham, Massachusetts. She participated in the commencement procession in a wheelchair, and despite a broiling sun, stayed there for the entire lengthy ceremony. She died 8 months later, on January 3rd, 1987. During the height of her career, Charlotte Friend was perhaps one of the most well-known and well-liked cell biologists and cancer scientists. She was a very warm and social person, albeit somewhat shy. She had a good sense of humor and a rather charming way of interacting with people. She was extremely generous when it came to distributing her virus, FLV, and her cells, FELC, to those who wanted to work with them. And she would give those investigators all the guidance and assistance they needed for their work. Many remember with pleasure visiting her laboratory, going to lunch, and talking about what they were doing or would do with the wonderful tools she provided. And if they were from out of town, she always made sure they were properly looked after. Her apartment in the Stuyvesant Town Complex on East 14th Street, I think that's where Kissinger lives also. I need to check into that. Came to be known as the Friend Hotel. 4 friends and colleagues from near and far were welcome to stay there when visiting New York City, and when they did, some for weeks at a time. So you can read the rest of the memento on the National Academies of Science. It's a honor to read her biography here. This was already an hour and 20 minutes. Just a quick review. I think her work was very influential in the advancement of and I don't know where that message is coming from. I want to turn those sounds down. Of the virus cancer connection. She did have a role with with her mentor, Alice E. Moore, in the Special Virus Cancer Program in the mid-1960s. What her role was beyond that, it's not clear. She had several accidental discoveries regarding the study of these leukemia cells in mice, which have been used by many, many different scientists. And while I wouldn't say she's among the top 10, it was really clear to me that much of the work of Charlotte Friend was referred quite frequently in the 1950s and 1960s, even by Jonas Salk at the Salk Institute. Not to take anything away from Charlotte Friend, but I don't mean to dismiss her work, but I do think it's possible, and I did want to put out there with some speculation that it might have been some of the research of Alice E. Moore that was funneled through Charlotte Friend. Just a possibility. Again, that comes off as potentially slanderous, but some of her earliest discoveries were done with Alice Moore. Alice Moore names were on the paper, and I know that some of those ideas were things which Alice Moore had been exploring. So while the Friend virus may be 100% Charlotte Friend's discovery, I'm open to the possibility, as I've seen this with other scientists, that sometimes discoveries are laundered, if you will, through different people. Or it could have been that Alice Moore and Chester Southam had an idea and were only able to get so far, and the idea never would have gone anywhere unless another scientist came in to take the research all the way to the finish line. That happens a lot too. I mean, I myself, not to say that I'm a Charlotte Friend, but have a whole bunch of ideas that, you know what, aren't worth a dime to me because I will never have enough time to implement all of them. So I'm happy to share them with other people and see what they can do. And I think I have some other people in my audience who are in the same boat. So with that said, I'm going to close the show down now. I may clip it down a little bit, but this is a biography of Charlotte Friend. And ask yourself why me was the person in this day of August 30th, 2022, was the first person to read out a biography of Charlotte Friend and put it on YouTube after all these years. A lot of metadata can be extracted from that statement. So with that said, thank you for joining. Please take care of yourself. Stay safe. Stay effective. Love you very much. Thank you for your support. I plan to be live streaming tomorrow, weather permitting, from Marlborough, Massachusetts, for a vigil for the 2,000 plus fatalities from opioid overdoses just in the state of Massachusetts from the past year. And maybe some people will be there that we can interview in the process. So that said, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care and God bless.